scope of our operations and what we did, like I said earlier, we didn't take orders from anybody. We didn't receive orders from stateside. We didn't receive orders from anybody in Vietnam. We ran our own intelligence. We did our own intelligence gathering. We planned our own operations, and we picked who went in the wood, and each individual carried, if he was a M60 machine gun man, he carried everything he needed for that M60. As a radio operator, I carried a Prick 77 radio. I carried a Car 15 rifle. I carried a massive amount of frag grenades, concussion grenades. I carried 2 or 3 canteens full of gasoline. Never put water in them. You never know when you need to burn down a house in the middle of the jungle. And we all carried incendiary grenades for burning down hooches. There were times we were all out of incendiary grenades and I actually needed to use the gasoline I carried, even though the boss used to gripe at me for strapping gasoline under my web belt. We targeted doctors, dentists, tax collectors, propaganda agents, village chiefs that were operating with the Viet Cong, district chiefs that were operating with the Viet Cong. Like I previously said, the majority of the time when we went in the jungle, we knew who we were going after. We knew approximately to the point of how many bodyguards he might have with him. One particular operation, we knew that the dentist was going to be coming through the town through secret zone to do dental work on any of the soldiers there that needed it. I don't really remember how many bodyguards there were with the dentist, but we took care of business. And one of the things that the dentist had on him, like any good dental shop in America, they've got extraction tools. They've got whatever they need to deaden somebody, and they normally, all of them, carry little plates of pure gold to cap teeth off. Now, this particular dentist probably had, I'm going to say about 20 very thin, 2.5 inch wide by 8 inch long, pure gold plates with him to cap work with. So we relieved him of that. We relieved him of all the other information that he had on him. Reason we would target doctors and dentists. If you're wounded, if you're a North Vietnamese soldier, wounded in South Vietnam, laid up in a jungle-filled hospital, and you only see a dentist or a doctor once a month, you're waiting to see that. You're waiting to see that man come through that door. But if we could take out a doctor or a dentist, it would take a couple of weeks for North Vietnam to line up another one, to send him down to South Vietnam, so that injured individual might be waiting, instead of once a month, it might be 3 or 4 months before he sees a doctor. So it's just one of the casualties of war, why they got put on top priority on our list. Other times when we didn't actually know who we were going after, but we had plenty of information that there might be river traffic coming down this one particular river, we would go out and set up an ambush. Now, we might have to sit there 6 hours, 3 days, or whatever. So that's how we would fulfill our operational part of it. We did have a lot of fun. We like to get in our boat. We like to take 4 or 5 pounds of TNT and go down the river and go fishing. And if we didn't have any time to go fishing, we'd break out the water skis, tie a ski rope to the back of one of our boats, and we'd go water skiing while we were getting shot at with small arms fire, or even when they would fire shoulder hail B-40 rockets at us. It didn't matter. It was all fun. The life was good when it was good, and it was bad when it was real bad. My Prick 77 radio had a foldable telescopic antenna that wasn't available to the Army or the other guys. It was one of the specialty items that we had, so I could hook it into my radio. I could bend it over and tie it off to my operating vest, and if I needed to, I could put it about 15 foot in the air. And it was strong enough to where the one or two times that I got stuck in the river due to my weight, that I was actually able to fold that antenna over to one of the guys on the bank, and they were actually able to pull me out of the river with that antenna. Carried my Car 15 in the jungle. I wore a Viet Cong shoulder vest for my magazines, and I would normally carry somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300 rounds with me. A lot of people don't believe it. Many of us SEALs operated barefoot in the jungle. You take a guy that's got a number 10 boot, strap a number 10 combat boot on him, let him be walking into marshy areas of Vietnam with 20 other guys in armbat boots, and first enemy soldier that walks by goes, "Ooh, they've been here." Go in the jungle barefooted. Most of us at SEAL team at that given time were munchkins. We weren't real tall, we weren't real big. So 8 foot barefoot or 9 foot barefoot, we just blend right in. They couldn't tell if we were another Viet Cong walking in the jungle. We always wore Levi's. The Levi's stood up to the harsh environment of a triple canopy overgrowth jungle. The elephant grass didn't cut them up. Military gear that we wore was a tiger stripe jungle cami top, and then our face paint and whatever hat we wanted to wear. When I did slip on a pair of boots and go in the jungle, there were certain given areas at certain times that I knew if we were going to be in the canals walking, I would put on a pair of tennis shoes, because I wasn't going to slip on my pantyhose and go walking in the jungle barefoot. So I would put on my pantyhose, I'd put on my Levi's, I'd put on my tennis shoes, and I would go walking. I had been walking in waist to titty deep water where I would have to put one hand in front of me and move it from side to side to get the leeches out of my way. You take a pair of pantyhose, slip them on, and a leech cannot attach to your body. You can take a pair of pantyhose, take 2 cans of cat food, put 1 can down one leg and another down the other leg, poke holes with a nice pick in that cat food, tie you a rope to the top of the pantyhose, throw it out in the ocean, and you can catch all the crab and all the lobster you want, because once their spines hit them pantyhose, they ain't coming off. So there's 2-fold or 3-fold for a pantyhose. Rub your wife's leg with that pair of pantyhose on. That'll keep the leeches off of you, or go fishing. We all carried morphine. We were all trained in how to do it. We all carried whatever means we wanted to handcuff an individual. Harold, the one I said that his older brother was a SEAL when Harold got killed. Most of us had bracelets made out of the rotary chain from a helicopter. The side under your arm was pretty smooth, so it didn't bother you, but that little bit of chain in there, you could get a bad guy to talk to you every time you rubbed it up and down his face. Well, we're on the subject of Harold. Harold and Sam were born Mennonites. Sam left the Mennonite community, became a Navy SEAL. Harold left the Mennonite community to follow his older brother, and Harold became a Navy SEAL. Harold laid down his life on that first tour of duty to Vietnam, and the death of a baby brother hit Sam so hard. He took a sabbatical from the Navy, got a theological degree, went back in the military as the only Special Forces trained chaplain in the United States, and finished out a 30-something year career and retired as a full bird colonel in the Army as a chaplain. Sam and I are still real close friends. We still talk quite often, and I do visit with him every chance I get in Montana. About 25 years later, I made my first personal visit back with Paul Barnes. Now, we had stayed on constant communications. Even after me and the wife first got married, it was real hard for her get a grasp on how expensive my telephone bill was. That was the best thing about the internet coming along, and I could just text him or I could just send him a note. So I finally made up my mind I was going to go up and see him. When he got married, I was coming back home off my second trip to Vietnam, and I didn't have his phone number, but I had his mother's. So it's nighttime in Hawaii, so I don't even remember what time it was in New York. So I called his mom, told her who I was. She said, I know who you are. She said, but he ain't here, so you can't talk to him here. She said he got married tonight, but here's his phone number to the hotel where he's at, and here's what room he's in. So I called and got his new bride on the phone, and she also told me that I could not talk to my drunk, passed out friend that night. So we got to visit the next day or two on the phone, and we carried on, like I said, for another 23, 24, 25 years. I made my mind up it was time I went to see him face to face. So I flew into Rochester, New York. He met me at the airport. We got to his house, and I had a good 4-day visit with him. Gordon Clisham and his wife Sandy came up. Gordon was the first one of us that got wounded and got medically discharged from the Navy, so they came up. And it was a great time. And the last morning I was there, Paul lives in a 2-story house. I'm sitting at the bar in the kitchen on a bar stool. He's hopping around the kitchen on one leg, cooking me breakfast. So we eat. He looks at me and he said, now follow me upstairs. He said, I want to show you something. So he hops upstairs and I follow along with him. We get in their bedroom and he told me to sit on the bed. So he's sitting on the bed next to me with his stub right next to me. And he pats it and he said, this is my leg, Clint. He said, I know you blame yourself for this because you asked me to go in the woods with you. He said, I went. It wasn't your fault. I went. And he said, what I want you to do is to realize it's not your fault. It just happened. And he said, what I'm going to do, he said, there were either 4 or 5 different prosthetics that he'd been given over the last 25 years. So he showed me number 1, number 2, and number 3, and how they had improved over the years. And then he put the last one on, which was a little computer-operated leg. And then he pulled his blue jeans on, stood up, buckled his belt. He said, we don't need to talk about this anymore. I said, yes, sir. So a number of years later, one of his daughters calls me and she said, Clinton, she said, if we fly you to New York, will you come up here and be the surprise birthday present for our dad on his 70th birthday in Ithaca, New York? She said, I know you love Ithaca shotguns. She said, you can even see where they were made for years. So I flew up, and I was probably there 4 or 5 hours before Paul. Paul didn't know I was coming, and he and his wife lived maybe 45 minutes to an hour outside of Ithaca. So when he and his wife got there, I was in the motel room hiding behind the door. Several of his old aunts and stuff were there, and a bunch of his cousins were already there, and they knew I was there. And when he walked in the living room of that motel room and saw me, he went to bawling. I mean, it was just a great reunion, and we had a blast. He got a second cousin, who's an active duty SEAL today, and he was there. So we got to tell old Vietnam War stories and then listen to new SEAL War stories. Frank Beaumart's daughter, Frank's the one I said was the second in charge. He was an enlisted man. When I got out of SEAL team, 76, Clarence Betts, Clarence the one I said that got so wounded his one leg ended up being a couple inches shorter than the other. He got discharged from the Navy. All of us SEALs stay in contact with each other. So when I left Coronado, California, I took all of my stuff to Clarence Betts' house. He lived maybe 35 miles outside of San Diego. I put it in his attic. I said, Clarence, someday I might come out here and get this up, and then sometimes it might just stay there forever. It just depends. So I left, and I'm going to say it was probably 93 or 94. I called Clarence, told him I was going to come to San Diego and like pick up my stuff. He said, it's still where you left it in the attic, Clint. So I got out there and sat down, drank coffee with Clarence, shot the bull, He said, you can get your stuff out of the attic under one condition. He said, you go talk to Frank Beaumont's wife. Boy, I just looked at him. Frank was what I call my sea daddy. He's basically took me under his wing as a young naval operator. And like I said, his daughter was somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 months old when Frank got killed. She had remarried a number of years later. She only lived about 8 miles from SEAL Team. Her second husband owned a large pet store in Imperial Beach, California. I walked in the door with a massive photograph album with me, and she went to bawling and when she saw me come through that door. So we sat down and we talked. She said the reason, she said, Clarence told me you were coming. She said the reason I want to see you. She said, Frank's daughter is in law school in Palo Alto, California. I need you to go talk to his daughter and tell her about her daddy. Well, that's the hardest thing I ever did in my life. Nora and I are still close friends. She's still close to all of us that fought and served with her daddy. X-RAY Platoon, about every other year or so, has a reunion back in Baltimore, either in Baltimore or Pennsylvania. And Nora will show up and bring her kids. Nora's the one that first took me to see the Vietnam Wall in D.C. It was really something to be there with a daughter. Mike was a Naval Academy graduate, had swam in tryouts for the 1964 Olympics. Even to this day at Annapolis, the pool is there, and there's a plaque inside as you're coming into the pool there in dedication to Mike Collins. I'm going to say about 2 or 3 months ago, one of Mike's old friends who was one of his swimmer partners, and he had called me, told me that the coach of the swim team at Annapolis wanted us to have a video conference so that all of the present day swimming members of the Naval Academy swimming team could listen to us while we told them exactly who Mike Collins was and what he did and why that pool is there in recognition of Mike Collins. So it was a good 45 minute teleconference that we had that was good, well done. Dick Beaver was the friend of Mike's that had contacted me, and the main conversation revolved around me, Dick, the swim coach, and one other military officer that had served in the Vietnam campaigns. Mike was just one of the most outstanding men I've ever known. Brilliant guy, well loved, well liked by all of us, and I've carried his memory with me so long that 30 years after his death, I had my first son, and my son is named after Mike Collins, where my son's name is Michael Clint Majors, and I did that solely in respect for Mike Collins. I stay in contact with several of his friends from his Annapolis days, even up to this date, and people that knew him, I still have contact with them and carry on conversations with them. His nephew, Paul Mendale, which is Paul's mother, was Mike's sister. Paul looks exactly like his uncle. While we were still living in Montana, Paul and his brother came to our house, and we visited and talked about his uncle and explained our feelings to him. Off and on every couple of years, we have a X-RAY Platoon reunion back east, somewhere in and around Baltimore, and Paul has shown up there several times. Frank Beaumont's daughter Nora will show up. So it's not just a military reunion, it's a military reunion of families.